lie Africa to the west and Australasia to the east. Between these continents is a vast ocean dropping to depths of over 20,000 feet. In the center, just south of the equator, and almost the furthest point from land, is the remote Chagos Archipelago. The Great Chagos Bank, some 100 miles long by 60 miles wide, was last charted in 1837. And from these soundings made with a piece of lead on a line, Charles Darwin concluded that the Chagos Archipelago was all that was left of a once gigantic coral atoll, which was now dead, eroding and disappearing beneath the waves. Today, all that remains is a chain of 7 small islands scattered along the western rim, from one called Danger in the south to Nelson in the north. The largest of these lonely coral islands is Eagle, midway along the rim of Darwin's dead atoll. In January 1975, the Ketch 4 friends laid down a mooring in the lee of Eagle's Lagoon. On board was a British Joint Services diving team of 18 men, who were to spend 2 months exploring these uninhabited oceanic islands. Their aim was to uncover and interpret the biological secrets of this oasis of dry land that still survives in the otherwise barren wilderness of the Indian Ocean.
What we want to do now...
All the servicemen were highly trained in survival, hand-picked to work alongside 3 scientists who hoped to prove or disprove Darwin's thoughts on the Chagos Archipelago.
3 teams. There's the space that we cut. It goes off down into deep water on this side. And if we have team 1, 2, 3, team 1, Tom with Clive and Dave Bellamy, down to the deepest...
David Bellamy, biologist from Durham University, coordinates the scientific work. He, with the expedition leader, Alan Baldwin, a commander in the Royal Navy, plans today's work for the team of divers.
If you can take the 80-foot dive on that same bearing, and Sharkey with Gordon and Charles, if you can follow it up with the 60-foot and the 40-foot dive.
Alan, how many teams will we have down at one time?
I want the deep dive by itself, covered by the other 2.
Early morning briefing spells out the area under survey. 3 teams will cover different depths along the chosen transect. This is transect 39.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you happy to do shark guard as well as take the pictures, Mike?
Yes.
Planning for the unexpected is essential, particularly with diving. Remote as this, any accident would be a major setback. There was a time when people lived on these islands, growing coconuts for copra, but no more. Today they are hot and inhospitable, and help is far away.
Yeah, it should be a good one on the team.
But all the time there's going to be the problem of survival, and key in that problem, especially with a large team like this, is going to be sufficient water. And so we plan the expedition for the rainy season, and this catchment, together with another one over there, should supply us with all our needs. But, you know, just in case, well, we've dug a well down through the coral rock to the water table underneath as a backup supply. But, you know, this rain isn't just going to supply us, it supplies quite a lush vegetation, the waxing grey coconut palm, because this, Eagle Island, was one of the most productive of the coconut plantations during the Great Copra era. And so the scientists have got quite a lot of work to do. Apart from the corals and the coral reef, we've got to study the land vegetation, the flora, the plants that are growing here, and the insects, and ascertain, if we can, exactly what the effects of man were on this atoll.
Many of the animals and plants which the expedition has already found have never been recorded in this part of the world. Some may prove to be unique.
I say, which one of those bodies bit me last night?
Well, it's almost certain it was one of these. These are not mosquitoes, but gnats. They also bite. And these, look, are the...
Mont Hiron specializes in birds and insects. For him, the Chagos is a biologist's paradise, unexplored and unexplained.
In the water filled coconut shells, and also in the water at the base of trees.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing these shots. They should be good.
From the pictures taken underwater, David Bellamy's scientific team will piece together the ecological pattern of this coral world.
Should be very good.
Current was a bit strong.
Yeah, but beautifully clear water, and that big fella came right up in front of the camera. Big view. His mouth slightly up.
Alpha India Sierra. Alpha November Golf November Bravo Alpha India Sierra. Roger.
The only contact with the outside world is by radio to GAN, an RAF staging post in the Maldive Islands some 400 miles to the north.
Sierra, Roger. Arrived Eagle Island, figures 1-1 January, and began clearing jungle and establishing camp.
Stop. Island covered with dotted palms, comma, low scrub and hardwood trees. Full stop. First working dives revealed huge fish population and inquisitive but friendly sharks. Stop.
All the equipment for the expedition had been landed on the island by a supply ship. In all, 25 tons of tanks, air compressors, tents, fuel, scientific equipment, and enough processed food to sustain 18 energetic divers for 2 long months. If you're to be cast away on a desert island, this surely is the way to go. The lagoon at Eagle Island is shallow water, protected from the open sea by a narrow reef that thunders with the constant pounding of the surf. A narrow channel worn by the ebb and flow of the mid-oceanic tides allows only the inflatable dinghies to pass through. This lagoon is of recent origin. Beyond it is the older coral rock that once made up the rim of the elusive Chagos Atoll. Transect 39 is a line due east from Eagle towards the center of the old lagoon.
Sharky, dive lead number 3 team, Mike and Adrian. Tom, number 14. Okay?
On the surface, the aqualine equipment is heavy and bulky. Below, the diver is weightless, even buoyant. And to help him down, he fits a leaded belt, which can be jettisoned in an emergency. The shark guard tests and loads his bang stick, a simple device to even up the odds against an over-curious shark. When the safety catch is off, the single .303 rifle bullet is the diver's last defense. But statistically, sharks aren't supposed to fancy divers.
Basics loading. Ready, dive leader? All ready. Ready then. Go.
This is the moment every diver waits for, the change from our world of sunshine and fresh air to an alien world which belongs to the fish and in which the fish belong. Here comes a white-tipped shark to see who's dropped in, but he finds nothing to fear from this bubbling invader. This is what makes the adrenaline run high. This is the moment of uncertainty.
Ready, number 3 team? Basic loaded. Okay, Tom. Ready. Go.
The 3 teams split up, each to a different depth on the same compass bearing. As the Coral Island slopes away to the bottom of the old lagoon, the scene on the seabed changes. David Bellamy is confident that a comprehensive sampling of coral at different depths on many such transects will give a clear indication of the basic structure of the reef. Like all sampling work, the coral collections must be sufficiently numerous to give statistically acceptable facts and figures. At the point where each team finds its allotted depth on the transect, the divers lay out a 2-meter square from which they collect one sample of every type of coral growing there. But before the collections disturb it in any way, the shark guard, doubling as photographer, comes in to take his picture. Along Transect 39, the quiet of the seabed is pierced by the clatter of chisel on coral rock. Sounds travel well underwater, better than light, a fact exploited by most marine animals. There are over 2,000 known species of coral, and identification is a problem. But every year the list grows as more is learned of their structure. David Bellamy signals his excitement at finding what looks to be a new variety. Only under the microscope will its true identity be revealed. Back at the camp on Eagle, Charles Shepherd, the third member of the scientific team, checks the bags of coral brought back from each dive. Out of water, their complicated structures and their colors become more apparent. But these are not inanimate chunks of rock. They are colonial animals which feed on plankton, use oxygen, grow and reproduce. Out of water, they die and decompose, leaving only their intricate skeletons of limestone. But back in the sea, the coral skeletons gradually add to the size of the reef, growing outwards into the warm tropical water. Over the years, during the evolution of the oceans, the water level has alternately fallen and risen. When coral reefs have been left high and dry, they perish, but form the basis of dry land, the birth of a new coral island. But why do corals behave and look so much like plants? Here, a brain coral is feeding, its thousands of stinging tentacles waving in the water to trap passing plankton, a typical way of life for so many carnivorous marine animals. When disturbed, the coral withdraws its tentacles, revealing the hard limestone skeleton beneath. In their method of feeding, corals are very similar to the familiar sea anemone. Indeed, they are closely related. But anemones form no limestone skeleton. When they die, they leave nothing behind. In this respect, they are more akin to the so-called soft corals. Although soft corals don't have skeletons that go to make up the permanent structure of the reef, they do contain many chalky spicules which, when the colony dies, contribute to the coral sand and sediment that helps fill in the growing platform beneath the sea. But it's the stony corals which are the main reef builders. It is now known that their hard skeletons are only made possible by minute single-celled plants which live within the very tissues of the coral. Without these tiny plants, the corals would be unable to lay down their chalky framework. These plants need light. Here lies the reason behind the coral's plant-like form. The deeper they grow, the less illumination falls on their surface. So many corals have evolved gigantic leaf-like shapes, which make use of all the sunlight that is available at depth. To measure the effects of light on coral, the expedition are testing a simple experiment. Pieces of living coral are placed in glass tubes, some of which are blacked out from light. Here, at a known depth, the living coral will be left for several days. The algae exposed to light will go on photosynthesizing, converting the energy of sunlight into new coral rock. The tubes are sealed, trapping seawater inside, and into each is injected a measured amount of carbon-14 radioactive isotope, which, during the process of photosynthesis, will be taken up by the coral. Here, Alan Baldwin and Charles Shepherd are testing the system for leakage with a colored dye instead of the isotope. But over the 2 months, the perfected experiment will be repeated at different depths, and the samples taken back for analysis in Britain. Slowly, we are beginning to understand more about the coral world. It is not only the corals and their plant partners that form the structure of the reef, but a whole host of other creatures. But for as many as help build, there are equally as many which erode away the living coral in their search for food. A dancing school of needlefish explore the reef, heads down and feeding in unison. The brightly coloured parrotfish paddle their way along the reef, rasping off the living coral with their impressive beaks. The Spanish dancer performs its aqua ballet. The stingray, its whip-like tail armed with poisonous saw-like spines, can inflict a painful wound. But in a world where food is so abundant, neither sharks nor rays are likely to attack a diver. They appear to relish the encounter, before lifting off the bottom like a hovercraft and winging casually away across the reef. Here in Chagos, in the middle of the Indian Ocean, is a center of biologic activity that teems with life. Without the coral, it would be as much a desert as the miles of barren ocean out beyond the reef. Dead coral rock breaks the surface, a platform above the waves. Now the race for land-based real estate is on. In come the invaders from the sea, intent on staking their claim on dry land. Here is the basic drive of evolution. Wherever a habitat is created with new potential, someone will move in. To the north of Eagle, on the rim of the old Chagos Atoll, lie 4 small islands. 3 of these islands are named on the old chart as the Three Brothers. A 4th, unnamed, rises several feet above the waves. The expedition christened it Resurgent. The divers had landed David Bellamy here a week before to explore the new island. Mont Hirons, although a non-swimmer, was impatient to see for himself the scene that David had described.
The last time I saw anything like this was on Aldabra, over 1,000 miles to the west of us. It's a raised reef, and as we know that the sea never gets up this high, this means that the rock must have been laid down in the past when the sea was that much higher. It's really a new island. I suppose I ought to claim it in the name of the Queen. The only trouble is, it's already been claimed by another invader.
A colony of masked boobies, one of the southern hemisphere species of gannet. Both David and Mont had studied masked boobies elsewhere in the Indian Ocean, but they never found them so far from the mainland. None of the existing ornithological records even mentioned them in this part of the world. But what is puzzling is the length of the beaks of these masked boobies, much longer than any Mont had seen before in any other colony. Perhaps here, on their isolated rock, they have evolved independently, out of touch with the rest of their kind. The longer beak may be only one of the subtle differences between the members of this colony and the mainland stock. This is just the kind of evidence which Charles Darwin used to build up his whole idea of natural evolution. Perhaps here, in the Chagos, we are witnessing the evolution of a brand new bird. Seabirds are often the first settlers on a new coral island. In search of somewhere to raise their young, they move in and take over. At sea, the adults feed on the rich fish stocks of the reef and bring back nutrients, depositing them on the barren land in the form of guano, enriching the sands, helping to produce soil. In time, the desert island gains a mantle of green, and on their feathers and feet come a range of seeds and even small worms and insects, pioneers who will in time transform the coral platform into a paradise, providing shelter and abundant food for a whole host of animals, including man. As well as Mont's ornithological scoop, the expedition had stumbled on a unique illustration of the way that evolution works to create a mature coral island. The story of a coral atoll is the story of evolution itself. If the newly named island Resurgent represents a stage in the colonization of a coral island, then the three brothers must typify the apex of the coral world. Here on Middle Brother, it is difficult to imagine a natural paradise more perfect. This is the world of the frigate bird, high in the coconut palms, cooling off in the soft tropical air. His mate, waiting for the next fishing trip out to sea. The fairy tern, preoccupied with its family life, hardly notices the human intruder. Although man has been on these islands, he has made no lasting impression. Life here seems uninhibited, unmolested, out of man's way. Back on Eagle Island, the expedition prepares to dive beyond the outer rim of the Chagos Reef. In case of accident, the recompression chamber is tested to the maximum depth to which the divers may safely go, 165 feet.
Can you open the main vent?
Okay, so I'm going to run back up now to 165 feet. Right, okay. 165 feet.
Beyond 100 feet, there is insufficient light for the reef-forming corals to thrive. They are places taken by the gorgonians and other deep-water corals which contain no plant partners and are therefore independent of light. One coral that does well at depth is the black dendrophilia. Unlike its reef-forming relatives, it needs no light, surviving solely on the microscopic animal life that it collects from the murky water. Nearer the surface, it would lose out in competition with the stony corals, which have an added advantage up in the light. Just as the divers are leaving the twilight depths beyond 100 feet, a large grouper ambles by. In the tropics, these huge fish are the real kings of the deep. Suddenly, he disappears from view over the edge of the old reef. A cliff of dead coral formed when the seas of the world were 100 feet lower than they are today. At the bottom of the drop-off, they find an underwater cave, eroded by the ebb and flow of ancient tides, perhaps 1 million years ago.
watch underwater, just like a palette of light. I can paint in the colours wherever I choose. Now this normally is a dull, blue-black world of animals. Hydroids, sea squirts, sponges and fish. I'm the first person who's ever come down here and lit it up in all its true colour. But more exciting, this is the first time the fish have been able to see the true beauty of their cave and the true beauty of themselves.
When a dive to depths of over 100 feet has been prolonged, a decompression stop is made on the way up, as a precaution against the diver's scourge, the bends. Not perhaps the ideal place to hang around.
On this line, I really do feel out of place. I am an intruder from another world. For the first time I realised the limited resource of air on my back and know my limitations within this alien environment. And I can't help thinking that man has no real permanent place in these islands, even up there on the surface.
But man was here on Eagle and removed the natural vegetation, replacing it with ordered rows of coconuts. But hopes for a boom in the international copra trade sank beneath the waves when, in 1935, the supply ship that serviced these isolated islands was wrecked. So man left, leaving his debris and his rats. Rats like coconuts, but nesting birds don't like rats. Today, Eagle Island is silent. Eagle, the largest of the Shakos Islands, has been subdued by man. But what of the smaller, less accessible islands? The ketch sails north again to land David Bellamy on the Three Brothers. Three of the islands are shown on the chart as covered with high palm trees, but the coconuts could have drifted there from Eagle without the help of man. David Bellamy is relieved to find that beyond the fringing apron of palms along the beach, the trees thin out. At his feet, the ground is soft and spongy, like a quicksand. Shearwater burrows, the homes of those oceanic birds that rear their young underground. This is conclusive proof that here on North Brother there are no rats. Without them and the dominating palms, the seabirds have a chance to flourish. To David's delight, most of North Brother turns out to be covered with hardwood forest, full of life. On the eastern edge, the trees give way to an open area of grass, monopolized by a colony of brown boobies, which, like their masked relatives, nest on the ground. If any bird ever returned to this planet as the dodo reincarnated, then this is it. In the tropics, wherever you find boobies, the chances are they'll be accompanied by the clatter of the noddy tern. Of the sights that the expedition found on the islands of Chagos, the forest of North Brother was the most reassuring, the most magical.
Just like the reef, the forest is a structured living system. And like the corals, the trees provide shelter, a home for a whole variety of animals. Up there in the topmost branches, the frigate birds stare gauntly out to sea, while the rest of the trees are festooned with nests of all sorts, all red-footed boobies and at least 3 sorts of terns. And down here on the forest floor, well, it's almost a different world, but in the big, dark, black humus, thousands of shearwaters have dug their burrows and are raising their families. Many of the holes contain just balls of down, the chicks. The parents are out at sea feeding, and they won't return to nightfall. You know, if there were rats here, those chicks would have very little chance of survival, unprotected while their parents were away. This whole place is seething, chock-bang full with life. If only these islands were just a bit bigger. Or what if we could remove the rats from Eagle, and how many birds would move in to find themselves a new safe home? But what about Danger, the island we haven't yet visited? It's almost half the size of Eagle, and from all the accounts it was rarely visited, even by the copra farmers. Perhaps its name holds a clue to its hostility. What are we going to find on Danger Island? And 2, what underwater? Are those southernmost reefs alive? And is that deep water channel marked on the old charts really an old reef channel with all the promise and excitement of surging currents and large predatory fish?
David Bellamy and his scientific team throw an improvised barbecue for their willing helpers. The climax of their work is in sight. Tomorrow they leave for Danger. Secretly, David fears that Danger will turn out to be like Eagle, given over to copra and then left to degenerate. The only hope he holds is that being so remote at the extreme south of the Chagos Bank, it may have escaped exploitation.
Where? The starfish leg or spray that chicken and kill that. You have to drag this one up and down. Dendrophilia.
For Mont Hirons, the ornithologist, the key indicator to the health of these islands is the bird life. He looks forward to Danger with quiet optimism.
There it is! Danger Island ahead!
Danger Island, no more than 2 miles long by a mile wide, described in navigational guides as inaccessible. A mere speck in the Indian Ocean, just another retiring member of the British Indian Ocean territories. But for the expedition, it has become the most significant place in the world.
Where's the reef from? That's a fantastic thing. I mean, there is no reef like we found on the Eagle and the others at all. It's just a shelve away almost to nothing. You know, it's super diving. Absolutely fabulous.
Here at Danger, there is no shelter. The full force of the open ocean pounds the beach. It is on this exposed side that the expedition hopes to find evidence that this is indeed the outer rim of the largest atoll the world has ever known, just as Darwin had suggested. The unanswered questions about Chagos will be resolved underwater. But on land, because of its size and remoteness, Danger Island may well prove to have more wildlife potential than all the other islands of the group.
Alright, up we go.
As the temporary camp goes up, a pair of pink-footed boobies continue their nest building as if the arrival of a British expedition were an everyday occurrence. A over the next few days, these two boobies become incredibly tame, observing with a tolerant eye all the comings and goings of their unexpected guests. If man has never set foot here, then perhaps they have no cause to fear him. On Danger Island, there are very few palm trees. In the open, temperatures soar. At times, the sand rises up to 140 degrees. Beyond the beach, the low skyvola scrub creates a dense jungle of green. These hardy shrubs are some of the first plants to move in when a new coral island is colonized, hindering erosion and giving shelter to wildlife. Here is a pristine coral island molded only by evolution. The main survey transect on Danger Island will run right across the center, from far out to sea on the shallow side, up over the island, and steeply down into the open Indian Ocean to the south.
What about that, Steve? That's 270 just to the left of that big palm tree over there. And continued out to sea over here, we've got a nice line out through the reefs to our water transect on.
Looks fine to me. That'll keep us clear of these boobies over here, and that further bush there as well.
Okay, well, let's put the flag in here then and get at it.
The transect across the island not only gives a line of reference for the topographical work, which shows how much of the island is above the sea, but it is also a means of access for the scientists through the dense undergrowth, so they can make an accurate study of the vegetation and an estimation of the numbers of nesting birds. Once the expedition has completed its work here, the narrow sway will be rapidly erased by new growth. Mont Hirons follows the swathing party along the newly cut transect. The local population of pink-footed boobies is larger than he had found on any of the other Chagos Islands. In all, Mont estimates that there are 4,200 pairs of these large gannets breeding on Danger. This fact alone points to the richness of the food supplies which they gather from the sea round here.